Today on TimesCast, David Kirkpatrick reports on Colonel Qaddafi's propaganda war and the refugees still stranded in Tripoli.
Their condition is desperate. They have very little food, very little water.
Small towns under rebel rule struggled to establish democratic governments. And in Benghazi, civilian volunteers head to the front lines.
Yesterday morning started early, a few hours before dawn, with an eruption of gunfire over the city, coming apparently from the neighborhood of Bab Azazia, where Colonel Qaddafi keeps his compound. Later, state television started announcing a series of big victories for the Libyan army against the rebels who are trying to oust Colonel Qaddafi. Victories up and down the coast. Now, there were no victories. The Libyan army did not make any important advances on the rebels. In fact, their position barely changed. They're still fighting about midway up the coast. So it's a bit of a puzzle why they did this. But by middle of the day, people out in the square believed not only that the army had won a few important victories in the cities here in the northwest, but that basically they had romped all the way up the coast, were about to take Benghazi, the rebel headquarters, and had even captured the rebel leader. I heard all these things from people in the square, and they were absolutely sure of them. None of that was true. And yet the party went on all day. So now, today, we've sort of been puzzling over what happened in Bab Azazia. Other than that, it's been a pretty quiet day here, so I went out to the Tripoli airport. A few days ago, there was maybe 10,000 refugees camped out there, a really miserable situation. Guards were beating them back. Since then, most of those people have gotten out, have been airlifted out somehow by their home countries. But what's left are a few thousand sub-Saharan Africans, people from Nigeria and Ghana primarily, most of them here illegally. And their condition is desperate. They have very little food, very little water. I saw little babies, some as young as 8 days old, camped out with their mothers in these makeshift tents. I saw people plucking these scrawny chickens and boiling them alive. It's pretty hard to fly in and out of Tripoli right now. The Libyan government certainly has got bigger problems to worry about.
This is Anthony Shadid for the New York Times. I'm standing here in Derna, a port city in eastern Libya. In cities like Derna, Beida, and Tobruk, activists are trying to formulate what might happen after the revolution. What kind of government will rule Libya in place of Muammar Qaddafi's 40 years of very mercurial rule? Already you're hearing debates over what kind of government might emerge, over what priorities there might be, over how the very government, the state itself, is going to be organized and relate to people that haven't had much of a say in their own lives for most of 4 decades of Qaddafi's rule. Derna was one of those cities whose revolt took even its residents by surprise. The Sahaba Mosque was the headquarters of the revolt, and it remains the headquarters in a way of this transitional government. Transitional government may be a glorified way of describing what's going on, but there is a lot of activity, almost a revolutionary fervor around organizing the incipient institutions that might emerge more forcefully after Muammar Qaddafi's fall.
And in Benghazi, David Bati reports on a construction worker joining the rebel forces.
At a small military camp in the city, prayer before heading to the front lines. In a few hours, civilian volunteers will leave Benghazi to join rebel forces. Omar al-Saguri, a construction worker, married 5 months with a child on the way, will join them in 24 hours.
جهاد فرض عين عشان بلادي عشان وطني ما نبيش ولدي يشوفه معمر أو بنتي لأن شفناه نحن سد.
For a few weeks, Omar has spent his days working security at the Rebel Media Center. He's the kind of guy who's quick with a smile and a joke. But that demeanor can fade quickly, like when asked if the rebels are well equipped to fight Qaddafi.
لا ما عندناش صح عندنا الإيمان بس عندنا الثقة في أن الله حينصرنا وضحت ماشيين وعارفين أرواحنا أننا ممكن ما نردش.
Like many in Benghazi, Omar's family, where he's one of 7 children, has played its own part in the revolution. As the uprising spread in February, Omar's 17-year-old brother was shot in the arm. Another brother has already served near the front lines.
أمي عمرها ما قالت نقل كانت تقول لنا يا تعيشوا رجالة يا تموتوا رجالة واللي يموت ممكن مش خسارة في ليبيا.
On the day before he planned to join the rebels, Omar visited the base he'd depart from.
أكيد أي حد بيخاف. لا مش جبان، مش كاو، بس نفس الوقت شر لابد منه. بيش طلعوا قدام لازم يموتوا ضحايا، لازم يموتوا.
Join us again tomorrow for TimesCast.